Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of childhood nostalgia, looking at tracks that make us nostalgic for our childhood. Today, we're going to be looking at a Metallica track off of the And Justice for All album called Dyers Eve. Now, I thought I had heard most of Injustice for All. It appears I haven't. I went and looked at the track list. I've probably only listened to 3 of the tracks, which kind of confused me, but then I went on to Master Puppets, and that's the one I've heard most of, but still not all of. I probably should do a deep dive into Metallica one of these days. But until then, let's check out Dyers Eve. Maybe for my first time. It's possible I listen to this, I'm like, oh, that's that song, but alright, let's dig into it. The Ritardando into the tempo. Oh! I don't recognize the riff at all, but I do recognize the lyrics. A really punky chord progression there at the end of that verse. Yeah, that halftime groove. Just constant aggressiveness. Relentless. Back to the intro. Ooh. Yeah, so the snare is actually on 1 and 3, and they did a little switch up, put it to 2 and 4 when the vocals came in. Uh, yeah, so that was interesting. Given our intro riff and our main verse riff, I thought I was in for something new. But no, I've heard this before, but the only thing I remember is James's work on the vocals, and a couple of the lines of lyrics. That's what stuck out to me. So this was a nice trip down memory lane for me as well. Interestingly, the song I think is about childhood, which might fit alongside the alternate aspect of the theme, which was intended to be. No, sorry. The intention was songs that made you think of your childhood. Um, but this one is actually a song about the artist's childhood, which is pretty cool. Wait, I think I have that back. I'm so confused because my intentions for the theme were misunderstood a little bit. Um, I think the intention was to get songs about the artist's childhood and their nostalgia for it, and we got songs that are about people, um, listeners, the songs that make them feel nostalgic for their own childhood. But I was actually corrected. The Rush video from Monday was about the musicians in Rush thinking back fondly on their days listening to the radio, nostalgia for their past. So yeah, actually, two of the three tracks this week have fallen in line with the intentions of it, which is cool. Um, so let's get into this. There's really only three modes to this track. We have our intro, the thrashy section, which goes between two different ideas of chugging and power chords. But it keeps a very similar intensity throughout, and then the halftime feel that pops up every once in a while with a bit of groove to break up the aggression a little bit. I want to start with the intro because it is probably my biggest problem with a lot of Metallica music is pacing and things overstaying their welcome. I Okay, that's a general term, and I do generally feel that way about a lot of Metallica's sections. But here specifically, I don't think the intro justified its length. It never changed anything up. We were experiencing it for 40, 50, maybe 60 seconds, a vast majority of this song, and we revisited it too, two more times, I think. That bum, ba, ba, bum, ba, ba, bum, bum, ba, ba, bum, ba, ba, bum, ba, ba, bum, bum, something along those lines. It comes up later on in the song again. There's no variation on it. There's no recontextualization of it. It is the same thing. It takes up easily 20, maybe 25% of the track, and it's not intensely interesting on its own, especially compared to everything else. It is a nice break when we come back to it, and I appreciate that those sections, when we revisit it, are a bit on the shorter side as a way to break up some of the intensity of the music, much in the same way the halftime groove section does. But in the beginning, it's quite overstays its welcome, and I feel that way about a lot of Metallica intros. That's not to say all their intros, and that's not to say that they only write repetitive music, but this song in particular, I do think it could have been cut in half and not affected the song at all. However, it does introduce to the listener the weight and aggression in the song, the ferocity of the guitar tones, the intensity of the snare hits. When we get the back-to-back snare hits, they're so much louder and more pointed, I suppose, than the tom hits that come around it. The tom hits are played with the pedal notes on the guitar, and then the accented notes on the guitar get the snare hits. And it completely showcases the type of music, the headspace that we're going to be getting into. I just I would just wish it was a little shorter. It's very effective at doing what it does. It just doesn't it's not paced well. Now we come out of this into the verse, and this is just shred. We have a pedal tone, we have some notes that move around it. We primarily sit on this pedal tone though. And like I said, a little bit of movement away and then a return home. A little bit of movement away, return home. Just very typical thrash metal stuff. We have vocals going on over it. The drums are. We get a snare on every single beat. It is exhausting. It is. It is. I don't know. It's like a hammer into my head on every beat. Just ga 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 ga. The tom sometimes that we get, the cymbals that accompany it, the bass kicks that accompany it, they don't really lighten it up at all, and it really works best for me at least to kind of push that snare sound into the background, so it's more of a texture than this constant banging. It is one of the big reasons why I tend to gravitate towards Metallica's more melodic writing, especially the stuff on Black Load and Reload, the stuff that nobody likes. um, I mean, Blackout, self title. I've been corrected. The other day I called it the Blackout, and they're like, actually, it's self title. And I was like, what? So I have 30 years of reprogramming to do as far as the name of that album. So I'm going to misname it. I'll probably continue to call it the Black Album for a very long time. Um, that one seems to have a little bit more love for it, but I see a lot of negativity for Load and Reload, and those are solid albums. They really are. I also like their slower ballads, though. Stuff like, man, the chorus to Sanitarium stuck in my head right now. That's just such a solid track. I'm not a big fan of their thrashier side, and I know that's where they came from. I know that's where a lot of their big fans are. Um, it's just right here. The drums are just too aggressive for me. It's a lot of rigidity. Oh, it's the same. Well, I mean, it makes sense because they're all similarly grouped, but black metal, the rigidity and consistency and ferocity of the drums are really difficult for me to get past, and it's very similar here. But yeah, so that's our verse, and then we have our vocals on top that provide a melodic element on top of the riffage and on top of the, uh, well, just the overall aggression of it. We do shift over into, we get away from the constant eighth notes, 16th notes in the guitar, and we shift over to, man, what are they? Whole notes? I'm trying to think of the tempo and how fast they're going with my interpretation of the tempo. I think they're whole notes though. Whole note chords that I said had like a punky flair to the progression itself, which I thought was interesting, but I know thrash and punk have similarities. I don't remember what the similarities were. Maybe they both came from the same place, or maybe they evolved alongside each other. I don't remember. But yeah, so there's some punky ideas there, which I thought was really cool. And We go back and forth on this, don't we? Verse chorus. Oh no, that's both of the thrashy verse. So let me get the chorus. At least I think it's the chorus. It's the halftime groove section, which I love. First of all, I'm a big fan of groove. Second of all, it seems to be more melodic based. You listen to what the guitars are doing. They're not focused on the aggressive texture. They're focused on a melodic idea, or maybe more of a chordal idea. It's not really a melody, but it is more melodic than the aggressive 16th notes they were playing. Love this section though. It's a great moment for me to breathe personally and catch my breath, but it also creates a contrast for the song. It gives the track a little bit of more characteristics and personality, and just keeps it from being exhausting. At least for me, I'm sure thrash fans can listen to 10 minutes of just constant driving guitar and drum. I can't. that's that's a bit much for me. So it gives me a moment to breathe and collect myself and get away from that. Well, primarily that snare drum. I really like this. The vocals seem to dig in a little bit more. They get a bit more grit. It kind of feels like it's been brought down to earth. It's removed that facade of extreme aggression and is looking at a type of anger or upsetness that feels more rooted in reality. And I think it's really nice to juxtapose that heightened aggression with this more realized one. We'll dig more into the lyrics and see if things kind of line up there, but I think it's important not for all art to do it, but for art to do that in general. Sometimes having that heightened, elevated, superficial, emotional element certainly works with your song and your art, and having it pushed to 11 or 12 constantly elevates the art and your themes. But for something like this, which I'm pretty sure is about feeling trapped in your childhood and being overly controlled in your childhood and reflecting back on that, especially in relationship to how your parents treated you, having a bit of a rooted element of your track against the heightened one is going to improve the emotional aspect of your song. Now, the final section that we need to talk about is our solo, which is kind of, it really wants to be an outro. When we get done with this, the solo bridge, when we come back to our final chorus, I think it is, maybe the verse, there's only like 40 seconds left in the song. And I think we do visit some new lyrics. Metallica is really good about bringing back new lyrical content after a bridge. We return usually back to an A section. I do feel musically it would have been really interesting to end it there with the solos. I don't think bringing it back really did anything to add to the song other than, of course, like I said, bring new lyrics and have something new to talk about. But it could also just be my fatigue. This is only a 5 minute song, but it felt like we listened to it for about 7 or 8 minutes, primarily because a lot of the thrash tends to grate on me, and the song feels longer than it actually is because I'm ready for something else to happen. It's just the general rigidity and consistency of the aggression that absolutely works for the themes of the song, but not my favorite kind of music. Now, the solos take all of the fast playing that we've heard in the verses up till now and just cranks it up to 11 and introduces sound effects and textures as well. Sound effects is maybe a weird way to word that, but it's utilizing elements of the guitar to achieve different sounds. I think the whammy bar is used in one of the sections. There is pick scraping, I think, maybe a slide at one point in time to create a new timbre, a new texture to the sound. But it's really fast, it's really gritty, and it has all these extra sounds to it that help gritty it up, give it that extra bite, and give it that extra aggression. I'd almost liken the solo to a type of lashing out, where the rest of the music has a fixed type of aggression to it. It's rigid, right? Like I mentioned with the verse, it's fast, but it's also mostly a home note. You move a little bit away from it, play a couple notes, come back down to the home note. You're constantly riding on this pedal tone. And so there's a uniformity, there's a controlled, constrained element to it. It's all tightly packed right around here, at least pitch wise. When we get to the solo, it is all over the place. There's so many different aspects to it. It's expressive through the use of the whammy and any other types of extra ways to control how the guitar sounds. The pitch is all over the place. We have rising ideas, we have falling ideas. It's been released. The leash is off. It's feels a lot less controlled, less constrained. It is where everything else is anger. This is a lashing out. And like I said, I really wish it kind of had ended there. If they had taken that and then went into the outro, because I'm pretty sure that's how we came out of the solo, went back into the intro. Sorry, not outro. Went back into the intro riff, and then came back to the final verse and chorus, I think. But what if we had just gone into the intro riff and finished the song out? Thematically, I think that works so much better because now you've released the chains. You are released of, in this sense, your parents' control. Um, and you are just thrashing out. You have all this energy that's been balled up and you're just letting it loose. And then you finish the way we start with that really slow ba-ba-bum, 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 bum, ba-ba-bum, and just like all the intensity and power that it represents. And that's how the song ends. That would have been so good. But instead, we go for more of a typical song structure and bring back in more of that restrained verse chorus aggression, which maybe works well when I look at the lyrics, and maybe the lashing out of the solo is not necessarily when they, left their parents' control, but instead maybe it was a minor acting out, right? And then the leash got put back on kind of vibe. Um, But the fact that it fits their typical song structure and the usual song structure for a lot of music at the time, I'm not sure if it's going to be thematically supported like that. But, well, let's find out. All right, so the first two, there are no choruses, but it is listed as a refrain, which is a halftime section. Um, I mean, in this case, I don't see a difference between the terms. I'm going to call it a chorus. It is a short chorus for sure, but I'm going to call it a chorus. The verses are exactly what I imagined they were from the few lines I picked up and what I remembered from my childhood. It's calling out his parents for all the ways that they hindered him. But then we get to the guitar solo and then the bridge, which I didn't know there were lyrics in the bridge. And I think this is really interesting because it's a little turn. Everything else feels like, I mean, the one line I think sums it all up. You clipped my wings before I learned to fly. There's another line around the same place in the first verse. He says, what is it? Oh yeah, pushed me into what's wrong or right, hidden from the things that they call life. So you've controlled everything I've heard, everything I've seen. You've told me who I am. You've told me what I need to do through life, and you haven't allowed me to live at all. So I think it's really interesting when the bridge kicks in. Um, he almost seems to want his parents back a little bit. He says, I'm in hell without you, cannot cope without you two, shocked at the world that I see, innocent victim, please rescue me. And this is obviously twofold. One, he's been sheltered his whole life, so he goes out on his own, and there's so much that rattles him. Like he says, I can't cope. Both of you have been my compass, whether I liked it or not. You've told me everything I needed to know, and I need that direction again. I don't think he necessarily says I need you to be my direction again, but he feels very lost. He calls himself a victim and he wants rescued, which is very different from the aggressive assertiveness that we've heard in the verses. And I really love how that's implemented here, especially coming after the guitar solo, which I still believe is a lashing out. That would be the moment where he gets to go out and explore life on his own without his parents' guidance. And it's wild, it's crazy, it's frantic. It could also represent what the world feels like to him. That solo happens, and then he explains that he's a shocked victim. You know, that is his first experience with the world, is something that is incomprehensible. It's loud, it's scary, it makes these sounds that guitars shouldn't make, you know? And that those lyrics come right after that. Verse 3 returns back to the seething hatred, though. He says, he says, the undying spite I feel for you. You knew that this was what was ahead of me, and you went ahead with how you raised me, anyways. I feel like bringing the guitars back in to that constraint, especially after that bridge, I don't know. I still think it'd be better if we left on that high note of chaos, then shifted over back to the verse. But yeah, fairly straightforward song. James has never really been one to hide stuff behind metaphor, not too deeply, anyways. I mean, clipping my wings before I learned to fly is certainly not a literal thing that happens. But nothing's really tucked too far into metaphor. Everything's fairly understandable on the surface, and that's what it is. It's a letter to his parents about the way that he was raised. So, those are my thoughts on Metallica's Dyers Eve. Let me know what you think of this track. If you enjoy it, anything that stood out to you, anything that you would like to add on to what I said, or correct me on, or give your own perspective on. Above the comment section is a description box, and in there is a link for Linktree. Takes you to this place right here. You can find ways to support the channel, a link to my music, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. We have a special selection coming up in a minute if you're watching this live. Otherwise, it's already there. And we'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual, unless you're watching this in the future, in which case it might be 10 p.m. Wait, if you're watching this in the future, it's already around. This video is old by then. Anyways, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.